Leading our bulletin, Capitec Bank could be following close on the heels of troubled retailer Steinhoff. Now, this as an explosive new report claims that Capitec is at risk of default and bankruptcy. The report by Viceroy Research calls for the Reserve Bank and Minister of Finance to immediately place Capitec into curatorship. The whistleblower group calls Capitec a loan shark with massively understated defaults masquerading as a community microfinance provider. Viceroy believes Capitec's concealed problems resemble those seen at African Bank Investment prior to its collapse back in 2014. Now, according to the bank's website, it has 8.6 million active clients. Capitec stock has fallen more than 16% this month. Viceroy Research says Capitec is a microfinance provider, yet out-earns all major commercial banks globally. We don't buy this story. Viceroy says this is indicative of a predatory finance, a claim corroborated by former customers and employees. Capitec must take significant impairments to its loans, which will likely result in a net liability position. As a consequence of refinancing delinquent loans, Viceroy believes Capitec's loan book is massively overstated. Viceroy believes Capitec is either fabricating new loans and collections or refinancing 2.5 to 3 billion rand in principal per year by issuing new loans to defaulting clients. Capitec has responded to the report saying, and I quote, "We have been informed of the allegations which Viceroy has made against Capitec Bank. We strongly refute these allegations and are in the process of gathering information to respond to the claims made in the report with facts. We are committed to providing clear and transparent information that will show that these claims are baseless," unquote. Meanwhile, the South African Reserve Bank, SARB, says it notes a report by US-based fund manager. The SARB statement reads, and I quote, "As part of our mandate, we monitor the safety and soundness of all banks, including Capitec Bank Limited. According to all the information available, Capitec is solvent, well capitalized, and has adequate liquidity. The bank meets all prudential requirements," unquote. Now, Dr. Azar Jameen, Chief Economist at Econometrics, is also joining us on the phone line on this story. Mr. Jameen, a warm welcome to you. Your initial take of this report by Viceroy?
My initial take was one of huge skepticism. Ever since I learned that Viceroy actually take positions prior to issuing reports on companies, I have to say that I am very skeptical as to the veracity and integrity of some of their analysis. Effectively, what they do is to sell the shares of the company that they're investigating short. In other words, they sell the shares without having them in the hope of being able to buy them back at a lower price and make a profit. And then once they issue their report, the share prices inevitably do decline. And so they cover those in, their positions in, and they make a turn on it. In the case of Steinhoff, they could have made as much as 85%. In the case of Capitec, they could have already made over 10% on that. But you have to ask yourself, what is the bona fides of them doing this exercise? Yes, it may serve a purpose in keeping a close eye on auditors around the world who might feel more inclined to be much stricter in terms of their auditing practices than would have been the case prior to this. But you have to ask yourself if it's entirely ethical.
No, this is an interesting observation. I mean, a first today that I've heard where somebody's going to be as objective and say that perhaps here we're seeing Viceroy double dealing in some way, as you say, because we've seen the share price drop. And who's to benefit in all of this?
Well, precisely. I think the shareholders in Viceroy are benefiting from this. And the concern that one has is that this could so easily have had a knock-on effect on the confidence of clients of Capitec who may have rushed out to withdraw their money from the bank. And it's for this reason that I applaud the Reserve Bank for coming out very soon to actually refute some of the claims made by Viceroy.
Now, on my initial perusal of this Viceroy research, one of the things they say is that Capitec is a microfinance provider, yet out-earns all major commercial banks globally. I mean, that to me also was somewhat malicious or vindictive to say, as a microfinance provider, why do they go out to out-earn all major commercial banks globally, when we know that if we just look at the demographics, we've got a lot of low-income earners in the country, so a number of them could then belong to Capitec and be banking with them.
That is precisely what I'm saying. Is to some extent, it's almost like the Bell Pottinger story in relation to the overall country, where Bell Pottinger went out of its way to make a bit of money, extra money, through its marketing joint, and at the end of the day, it did a lot of damage to race relations in the country. In this case, I think Viceroy may well have gone out of its way to make a turn on Capitec, but without recognizing or accepting that that this could have major ramifications for the poorer sections of our society.
But if we had to talk about the model of Capitec Bank itself, would you say that it's sustainable? Because we're seeing that, yes, they are targeted at the more low-income earners. They are in the majority in the country, but a number of people are now overexposed.
I think you're quite right in questioning, in raising that question. However, I would counter that by saying, well, there was another big microfinancier in the form of African Bank. And when African Bank went belly up, you would have thought that Capitec would have followed suit. The fact that it did not do so suggests that its model of microfinancing was much more sound than that of African Bank.
Would we say that it's attributed to them now becoming a fully fledged bank, that they went on to offer all services?
Yes, the fact is that they have. I mean, I myself, as a higher income individual, have been tempted to invest money into Capitec in order to secure a higher interest return than I can get in other banks. And I'm sure a lot of quite well financed people would have actually taken up that opportunity. So I would recoil away from suggesting that all the money that Capitec has gained is necessarily spurious and of poor quality.
Now, also joining us in this conversation is Viv Govender, market analyst. Mr. Govender, your initial take of this Viceroy report on Capitec?
Yes. The issue here isn't so much just the accounting issue. I think there's also some issues around some of the practices, which I don't know if they are correct or not. For instance, the initiation fees being charged to people that have, these loan facilities. So there is apparently an initiation fee charged every time you want to take a slightly larger loan from the company, and they account for, apparently, according to the report, about a quarter of the company's earnings. Those kind of things, I do think, have to be looked at to a certain extent if they are true. You don't want to have lower income people who are desperate for cash being overcharged for certain kind of, services. But like Mr. Jameen has said, this is a case of a very small company. We're talking an absolutely tiny company compared to the larger financial institutions of the world. Very small number of people. I think it's about 3 analysts in total. Some of them are quite inexperienced. Some of them come from a very different kind of background. One's a social worker, for instance, or former social worker. And the fact of the matter is the fact that they can go out and actually make an impact on South Africa is something that we should be concerned about. Not just, even if they are, malicious, or even if they are doing it for the wrong purposes. If a cat can kill an elephant, it's not so much the cat is strong, it's because the elephant is sick. If a tiny little company like this can make such a big impact on a market like South Africa, it's not because they are so strong. It's not that because they have so much power. It's because our financial system at the moment is under, a bit of scrutiny. It is weak at the moment. There's questions about the regulator. There's questions about just how we've, looked at our companies, how much attention the regulators are actually putting to whether or not some of the statements and some of the actions of our companies are correct. And so when you have a case like this, where a very tiny company makes a huge impact on a market the size of South Africa, it's not the case that what's special about the Viceroy, it's what's weak about South Africa at this moment, and what do we need to do to change the impression in South Africa. I mean, before the news came out, it was Capitec. There was questions about resilience, there was questions about Aspen, that people were just basically looking for which was going to be the next company that these guys were looking at. And that shouldn't be the case in a country that's well regulated.
Mr. Jamin, just your closing remarks there. I mean, we're hearing Mr. Govender saying that it doesn't matter what could be the reasoning behind Viceroy releasing such research, but it needs to be interrogated nevertheless. We seem to have lost Mr. Jamin there. But Mr. Govender, your words, closing remarks there?
Yeah, look, we don't have enough information as analysts at the moment to go through to basically verify or not verify. We need to get a bit more. It takes a bit of time for these things to go through, and specialists need to go through and make sure that all the statements are correct. And then, of course, Capitec has to have a response to these allegations. And so that is something that I think we can always discuss whether or not Capitec itself should be the or whether Capitec at the moment is a good buy because it's fallen so much, etc. But what I think the larger issue is, and I've been talking about this for some time, is the fact that how is it possible that a small company like Viceroy is able to have such a huge impact on a market like South Africa? If they went to a country like, let's say, the UK or France or Germany and they released a report, or say they released a report about something in the UK or Germany or something, you wouldn't find multiple companies in Germany dropping double digits on the anticipation of the report being released. And that's an indicator to me, at least, that there is some weakness in the perception of the regulation in South Africa, and that is why we are so vulnerable to these kind of attacks.
No, it's an interesting fact. Mr. Govender, thank you very much for joining us. That's Viv Govender, markets analyst, who's joining us on the story of an explosive new report that claims Capitec is at a risk of default and bankruptcy. That report is by Viceroy.